The great hall stretched upward for nearly a mile. Its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light, and its floor was a single piece of polished stone brought from a dead world at the galaxy's core. For 12,000 years, the species of the galactic conquered had gathered here to decide the fate of civilizations. Today, they had gathered to pass judgment on humanity. Ambassador stood alone at the center of the hall. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm brown eyes. Around her, rising in countless tiers, sat the representatives of 847 spacefaring species. Some were massive creatures of stone and metal. Others were clouds of gas held together by magnetic fields. A few looked almost human, but most did not. All of them watched her with expressions she had learned to read over 20 years of diplomatic service. She saw fear. She saw anger, and in some faces she saw something close to shame. High Chancellor rose from his throne at the highest tier. His body was made of living crystal, similar to the walls around them. He was old beyond human understanding, one of the original founders of the conquered. When he spoke, his voice rang through the hall like the sound of breaking glass. "The matter before us today concerns the species known as humanity," he said. "After careful study and long debate, this council has reached its decision." Kept her hands folded in front of her. She already knew what was coming. The signs had been clear for years. Humanity had made the other species nervous from the very beginning. Humans bred too quickly. They spread too fast. They asked too many questions and broke too many rules. Most of all, they had achieved faster-than-light travel in only 300 years. Most species took thousands of years to reach that milestone. Some took tens of thousands. The speed of human progress had frightened the galaxy. "Humanity is hereby expelled from the galactic conquered," announced. "All human vessels must withdraw from conquered space within 72 hours. All treaties are dissolved. All trade agreements are canceled. Humanity will have no further contact with member species until this council decides otherwise." A murmur ran through the assembly. Some species stamped their limbs in approval. Others remained silent. Notice that several delegations refused to meet her eyes. She wondered how many of them had argued against this decision behind closed doors. She wondered how many had simply been too afraid to speak up. "The accused may now make a final statement," said. Looked around the hall one last time. She thought about all the things she could say. She could beg for mercy. She could promise that humanity would change. She could threaten revenge. But she knew that none of those things would matter. The decision had been made long before today. This trial was just a formality. "You call us dangerous because we grow," she said. Her voice was steady and clear. "You fear us because we dream. You cannot predict what we will become, and that terrifies you. So you cast us out, hoping that isolation will break us." She paused and looked directly at. "It will not. We are human. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars. We have survived ourselves. We will survive this too." She turned slowly, making sure to look at every section of the assembly. "Today you push us away, but remember this moment. Remember what you chose, because we will not beg to return. When we meet again, it will be on our terms." She walked out of the hall without looking back. The news reached Earth within minutes. By the time ship entered the solar system, the world had already changed. Protests filled the streets of every major city. Some people cried. Some raged. Some simply stared at the sky, trying to understand what it meant to be alone in the universe. President Daniel Marsh addressed the planet from the steps of the rebuilt United Nations building in Geneva. He was a tall man with tired eyes and a voice that carried the weight of impossible responsibility. Behind him stood the flags of every nation on Earth, united for the first time in a single cause. "My fellow humans," he began, "today we received news that many of us feared. The Galactic Conquered has expelled us from the community of spacefaring peoples. We have 72 hours to bring our citizens home. After that, we will be alone." He paused and looked into the cameras. "But I want you to understand something. This is not the end. This is a beginning. For a century, we have lived in the shadow of older civilizations. We have borrowed their technology, followed their rules, and accepted their judgment. We forgot what made us human in the first place. His voice grew stronger. We are explorers, we are builders, we are dreamers who refuse to accept limits. The galaxy looked at everything we could become and it was afraid. Good. Let them be afraid, because we will not stop growing. We will not stop reaching. And one day, when we have become everything they feared, we will remember who believed in us and who did not. Admiral Sam had served in the fleet for 30 years. He had fought pirates in the outer colonies and negotiated with alien commanders along the border. But nothing in his career had prepared him for this moment. In 72 hours, he had to bring home every human being living in conquered space. That meant millions of people scattered across thousands of worlds. He stood in the command center of the carrier Resolute, watching the largest fleet movement in human history unfold on his displays. Ships of every size jumped from system to system, picking up families and workers and diplomats. Some people came willingly, already packed and ready. Others had to be convinced. A few refused to leave at all, choosing to take their chances as refugees in alien space. "Admiral," his aide said, "we have reports of harassment near the border. Local security forces are preventing our ships from landing." "How many people are stranded?" "About 12,000. Sam closed his eyes for a moment. 12,000 human beings stuck on a world that no longer wanted them. He made his decision quickly. "Send the 4th Battle Group. Full combat formation. Tell them that those people are coming home, and anyone who tries to stop us will regret it." It was a bluff. The human fleet was powerful, but it could not fight the entire Concord. Fortunately, they did not want a war any more than he did. 3 hours later, the stranded colonists were aboard human ships, jumping toward home. The deadline passed at midnight Earth time. Sam watched the final ships cross into human space, their drives burning bright against the darkness. Behind them, the border sealed. Navigation buoys went dark. Communication relays fell silent. For the first time since humanity reached the stars, they were truly alone. Sam looked out the window at the distant glow of the galaxy's core. Somewhere out there, hundreds of species were celebrating humanity's fall. They believed they had solved the human problem forever. Sam smiled grimly. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. 3 years had passed since the ouster, and humanity was learning what it meant to stand alone. The 12 solar systems that made up human space were located on the galaxy's edge, far from the rich trade routes and resource-heavy regions that other species controlled. The conquered had allowed humanity to settle there because nobody else wanted the territory. The stars were dim. The planets were harsh. And now, without access to galactic technology and medicine, every weakness in human civilization was exposed. Dr. Lisa Grant had not slept properly in months. She ran the primary research facility on New Anchorage, a frozen world that humans had terraformed just enough to survive. Her team of 300 scientists worked around the clock, trying to replace every piece of alien technology that humanity had once taken for granted. The medical crisis had been the worst part. For decades, humans had relied on conquered pharmaceuticals to treat everything from cancer to the common cold. When the supply disappeared overnight, hospitals across human space were overwhelmed. In the first year alone, nearly 2 million people died from diseases that should have been easily cured. Lisa had lost her own brother to a lung infection that would have been treated with a simple alien injection. The grief had nearly destroyed her. Instead, she channeled it into her work. Her team developed a human alternative to the alien medicine within 8 months. It was not as elegant as the conquered version, but it worked. It saved lives. "We spent so long borrowing from them," she told her team during a late-night meeting. "We forgot how to think for ourselves. Every time we faced a problem, we just bought the alien solution. Now we have no choice but to create our own answers." She looked around the room at their exhausted faces. "And you know what? Our answers are turning out to be pretty good." She was right. Across human space, necessity was driving innovation at a pace nobody had expected. Engineers who had once relied on alien power cores designed new fusion reactors that were smaller and more efficient. Programmers who had used conquered software created new operating systems that did not require alien hardware. Farmers who had depended on imported alien seeds developed new crops that could grow in harsh conditions. Humanity was not just surviving, it was beginning to thrive. Commander Park stood on the observation deck of the Titan shipyards, watching the skeleton of a new warship take shape against the backdrop of Saturn's rings. He was a serious man with sharp eyes and a reputation for demanding excellence from everyone who served under him. The old human fleet had been built with Concord-approved components: alien engines, alien weapons, alien shields. The designs had been reviewed by Concord inspectors who made sure that human ships were never too powerful or too fast. Those days were over. "The new class will be called the Sovereign Series," explained to the group of officers who had come to tour the facility. "Every part is human-designed and human-built. No alien technology, no alien limitations." One of the younger officers raised her hand. "Commander, the old designs were tested and proven. How do we know these new ships will hold up in combat?" Smiled slightly. "Because we built them the way we always should have. The Concord forced us to think inside their box. They told us what was possible and what was not. Now we are free to find out what humans can really do." The Sovereign-class ships incorporated ideas that alien engineers had rejected as impractical or dangerous. They were faster, more agile, and carried weapons that no Concord inspector had ever approved. They were ships built for human reflexes and human instincts. When the first prototype completed its test flight, it outperformed every projection by a factor of 3. But the greatest breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Torres was 26 years old and worked as a maintenance technician on a cargo hauler called the Dusty Miller. He had no advanced degrees and no special training. He was just a young man who was good with machines and liked to tinker with things. One night, while trying to repair a malfunctioning jump drive, made a mistake. He crossed 2 power conduits that were never supposed to be connected. The drive should have exploded. Instead, something strange happened. The ship jumped to its destination in a fraction of the normal time. Stared at his instruments in disbelief. He ran the numbers again. He ran them a third time. Then he called his captain. "Sir," he said, his voice shaking, "I think I just broke physics." The discovery spread through human space like wildfire. Scientists analyzed accidental modification and confirmed that it worked. The new configuration created a different kind of space fold, one that cut travel time by a factor of 8. A journey that once took months could now be completed in weeks. A journey of weeks became a journey of days. They called it the Torres Fold, named after the young technician who had stumbled upon it while trying to do his job. Became famous overnight. He gave interviews and received awards, but he always seemed uncomfortable with the attention. "I just crossed the wrong wires," he told reporters. "Any engineer could have done it." But that was exactly the point. Any human engineer could have done it, if only they had been allowed to try. The Concord had spent centuries teaching humanity that alien technology was superior and that human innovation was dangerous. They had convinced humans to stop experimenting, stop questioning, stop pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Now, in isolation, humanity was remembering who they really were. President Daniel Marsh stood before the Federation Council, which had replaced the old national governments 3 years ago. The chamber was filled with representatives from every human colony, united under a single banner for the first time in history. "When they cast us out," Daniel said, "they believed we would fade away. They thought we would beg to come back. They were wrong." He gestured to a holographic display that showed human territory. It was small compared to the vast Concord, but it was growing. In 3 years, we have replaced their technology with our own. We have cured diseases without their medicine. We have built ships without their approval. And thanks to a young man named Tors, we can now travel faster than they ever imagined possible." He paused and looked around the chamber. "We did not choose to be alone, but we are making the most of it. And I promise you this, the species that feared us 3 years ago will have far more reason to fear us in the years to come, not because we seek revenge, but because we will never stop growing." Far from human space, a conquered observation drone drifted through the darkness, monitoring the border. Its sensors detected a human ship emerging from a Tor's fold, traveling at speeds that should have been impossible. The drone recorded the data and transmitted it to Concord Command. For the first time in 3 years, the galaxy began to pay attention to humanity again. What they saw made them nervous. The humans were not fatting away. They were getting stronger. 15 years had passed since the ouster. The small cluster of 12 systems that humanity once called home had grown into something far greater. 200 solar systems now flew the blue and green flag of the Human Federation, stretching across a region of space that the Conquered had never bothered to explore. Captain stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Dauntless, watching the stars slide past on the main display. She was 43 years old, with short red hair and the kind of confidence that came from years of commanding ships in unknown territory. Her crew of 200 represented every major human colony, chosen carefully to show that humanity's expansion belonged to everyone. "Captain," her navigation officer called out, "we are approaching the edge of the outer veil." Nodded and walked closer to the display. The outer veil was a region of space that the Conquered had declared impassable centuries ago. Gravitational anomalies twisted the fabric of spacetime there, making traditional faster-than-light travel impossible. Ships that entered the veil rarely came back. But the Tor's fold worked differently. Human scientists believed it could navigate the anomalies where other drives could not. The Dauntless was here to prove them right. "Take us in," ordered, "nice and slow." The ship shuddered as it entered the veil. Warning lights flickered across the bridge as sensors struggled to make sense of the distorted space around them. Gripped her chair and kept her eyes on the display. She had promised her crew that she would bring them home safely. She intended to keep that promise. 3 tense hours later, the Dauntless emerged on the other side. The crew erupted in cheers. They had done what the Conquered claimed was impossible. And then they saw what was waiting for them. Dozens of ships hung in the darkness ahead. They were unlike anything in human records, built from materials that seemed to bend light around them. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the communications officer spoke up. "Captain, we are being hailed." The message was simple, transmitted in a language that the ship's computer took several minutes to translate. When the words finally appeared on screen, felt a chill run down her spine. "We are the remnant. We have waited a very long time to meet someone brave enough to cross the veil." The remnant were ancient. Their civilization had flourished millions of years before the Conquered existed. They had been explorers and scientists, pushing the boundaries of knowledge in ways that even modern species could not fully understand. And then the founders of the Conquered had come. The remnant elder who met with was called simply the Keeper. His body was thin and fragile, covered in a kind of living silver that rippled when he moved. His eyes were deep and sad. "The Conquered was not always what it is today," the Keeper explained. They sat together in a chamber aboard the remnant flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing star maps from ages long past. When the first species came together, they promised to share knowledge and protect each other. But over time, that promise was forgotten. The Conquered became something else, a tool for control. He waved his hand, and the display changed to show a long list of species names. Many of them were marked with red symbols. "These are the species that were ousted before you," the Keeper said. "Some were too innovative, Some asked too many questions. Some simply grew too powerful for the conquered's comfort. They were expelled, isolated, and eventually forgotten. Stared at the list, there were hundreds of names. What happened to them? The keeper's expression grew darker. Some survived in hiding like us, many did not. The conquered does not simply cast species out. It watches them. It waits for them to weaken. And then it sends ships to finish what isolation began. The words hung in the air. Thought about everything humanity had built in the past 15 years. She thought about the colonies and the ships and the millions of people who believed they were safe. She thought about her own family back on Earth. "They are going to come for us," she said quietly. "Yes," the keeper agreed. "Eventually, they will. That is why we have watched you with such interest. You are the first ousted species in centuries to grow stronger instead of weaker. You are the first to cross the veil and find us." He leaned forward and his silver skin rippled with light. "We have knowledge that could help you, technologies the conquered suppressed long ago, but more importantly, we have something else." He gestured at the star map. "Contact with others who were cast out, others who still survive, scattered across the galaxy, waiting for someone to unite them. Return to human space with the remnants' data stored in the Dauntless's computers." She presented her findings to the Human Federation Council in a session that lasted for 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming. The conquered had been systematically eliminating potential rivals for thousands of years. Humanity was just the latest target. Admiral Dawson was the first to speak after finished her report. She was an older woman with white hair and a reputation for never backing down from a fight. "We have two choices," said. "We can hide and hope they forget about us, or we can prepare for what is coming and find allies who will stand with us." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would not hide. Within months, human ships began making contact with the species the remnant had identified. They had been expelled 4 centuries ago for breeding too quickly. The aquatic had been driven from there after their population grew too large. The silicon-based had been ousted for developing weapons technology without conquered approval. One by one, they answered humanity's call. They came to human space as refugees and stayed as partners. Together, they formed something new, the Free Worlds Compact, an alliance of species that the galaxy had rejected, now standing together against the power that had cast them out. The first meeting of the Compact was held on New Geneva, a space station built specifically for the occasion. Representatives from 27 species sat together in a great circular chamber, their differences set aside in favor of a common purpose. Now promoted to admiral, addressed the assembly. "We were all told that we were too much," she said, "too fast, too dangerous, too ambitious. They pushed us out and expected us to disappear, but here we are standing together." She looked around the room at faces that were alien and strange and beautiful. "The conquered built its power on fear and control. We will build ours on something different. Trust, cooperation, the belief that every species deserves a chance to grow and dream and reach for the stars." A ripple of approval moved through the chamber. For the first time since the ouster, humanity was not alone, and the Free Worlds Compact was just getting started. Far away, in the crystal halls of Conquered Command, High Chancellor studied the latest intelligence reports. Human territory had expanded far beyond what anyone had predicted. Worse, they were gathering allies, species that should have been long dead or completely broken. The human problem was becoming a human crisis. "Prepare a punitive fleet," ordered. "It is time to remind the galaxy what happens to those who defy the conquered." 30 years had passed since the ouster. Human territory now spread across more than 1,000 solar systems, and the Free Worlds Compact had grown to include over 300 species. What had begun as a collection of exiles and refugees had become something that the galactic conquered could no longer ignore. Chancellor Adam Cole sat in his office on Earth, reading the latest intelligence reports. He was a calm man in his 60s, with silver hair and steady hands that had guided humanity through its greatest period of growth. But the news in front of him made even his composure waver. 300 conquered warships had been spotted moving toward human space. They were crewed by a dozen different species, armed with weapons that had not been seen since the last great galactic war. This was not a patrol or a show of force. This was an invasion fleet. Adam called an emergency meeting of the Federation Council. Within hours, the leaders of humanity and their compact allies had gathered to discuss the crisis. They are targeting the border colony of, Admiral Dawson reported. She displayed a holographic map showing the approaching fleet. Based on their current speed, they will arrive in approximately 6 days. Can we evacuate the colony in time? Someone asked. Perhaps, but I do not recommend it. His voice was firm. If we run from, they will know we fear them. They will push deeper into our territory. More colonies will be threatened. More people will die. She looked around the room. We have spent 30 years preparing for this moment. Our ships are faster. Our weapons are stronger. Our crews are trained for exactly this kind of fight. If we stand at, we can win. The decision was not easy. Was home to 3 million people. If the battle went wrong, they could all be killed. But running would only delay the inevitable. Eventually, humanity would have to fight. Better to do it now on their own terms. Chancellor Adam Cole gave the order. The human fleet would make it stand at. Governor Bate received the news on her personal communicator while walking through the streets of city. She was a tough woman who had spent her whole life on frontier worlds, building communities where others saw only empty rock. She was not going to let the conquered destroy everything her people had created. She addressed the colony that evening, standing on the steps of the central government building with the stars visible above her head. I am not going to lie to you, she said. A conquered fleet is coming. They want to destroy us and send a message to everyone else who dares to defy them. She paused and looked at the crowd. Families, workers, children, ordinary people who had built their lives on this distant world. The Federation has given us the choice to evacuate. Many of you may want to take that option, and I will not judge you for it. But I am staying. This is my home. I helped build it with my own hands, and I will not let anyone take it from me without a fight. By the time the conquered fleet arrived, fewer than 10% of the colonists had chosen to leave. Admiral Dawson watched the enemy ships emerge from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 300 vessels, arrayed in the classic conquered battle formation that had crushed rebellions for. Their commander, an admiral named Z, broadcast a message to the human fleet. This is your final warning, Z declared. Surrender now and your people will be treated fairly. Resist and you will be destroyed. Smiled grimly and opened a channel to her own fleet. 47 human warships and 32 allied vessels from the Free World's compact. They were outnumbered almost 4 to 1. But numbers were not everything. All ships, she said. This is Admiral Dawson. They came here expecting us to run. They expected us to be afraid. Let's show them how wrong they were. All wings engage. The battle began. The conquered fleet moved forward in perfect formation, confident in their superior numbers and firepower. They had fought countless battles over They knew exactly how their enemies would behave. They expected the humans to form defensive lines and try to hold position. Instead, the human fleet scattered. Sovereign-class warships vanished into Tor's fold jumps, reappearing moments later behind the conquered formation. Before the alien commanders could react, human weapons were already firing. Pulse cannons ripped through shields that had been designed to stop conventional attacks. Missile swarms confused targeting systems with electronic warfare that the conquered had never encountered before. The alien ships tried to turn and engage, but the humans were already gone. Another fold jump, another angle of attack. The conquered formation, built for coordinated assault, became a liability. Ships blocked each other's firing lines. Commanders gave conflicting orders. Chaos spread through the alien fleet like a disease. Admiral Z screamed at his officers to maintain discipline, but it was too late. Human ships darted through his formation like wolves among sheep, striking and vanishing before his gunners could draw a target. 30 years of innovation, 30 years of building ships designed for human reflexes and human tactics, 30 years of preparing for exactly this moment, all came together in a devastating display of military precision. The Allied ships from the Free World's Compact fought alongside their human partners, using technologies that the Remnant had preserved from ancient times. Fighters swarmed around conquered cruisers, their pilots able to withstand acceleration that would kill most species. Vessels released clouds of nanomachines that ate through enemy armor. Warships fired weapons that bent spacetime around their targets, crushing them from the inside out. 4 hours after the battle began, Admiral Z gave the order to retreat. 63 conquered vessels had been destroyed. Another 100 were too damaged to fight. The rest fled back toward conquered space, their crews shocked and demoralized. Behind them, the human fleet regrouped above, battered but victorious. Governor Bates stood on her balcony and watched the battle's aftermath unfold in the night sky. Debris burned as it fell through the atmosphere, leaving trails of fire like shooting stars. She thought about all the people who had chosen to stay, who had trusted that their fleet would protect them. Their trust had been rewarded. Across the galaxy, the news of spread like wildfire. For the first time in recorded history, a conquered punitive fleet had been defeated. The species that humanity had been told were invincible had been driven away in shame. On a dozen conquered worlds, oppressed populations began to whisper, if the humans could fight back, maybe others could too. Protests broke out on planets that had been quiet for centuries. Local security forces struggled to maintain control. The cracks in the conquered's authority, invisible for so long, suddenly became impossible to ignore. High Chancellor received the news of the defeat in his private chambers. He dismissed his aides and sat alone in the darkness, thinking about what had gone wrong. 30 years ago, he had believed that expelling humanity would solve the problem. He had been so certain that isolation would break them. Instead, it had made them stronger. It had given them time to innovate, to build, to gather allies. Now they had proven that they could fight, and the entire galaxy had seen it. The human problem had become a crisis, and now realized it might be too late to stop. In her quarters aboard the flagship, Admiral Dawson allowed herself a rare moment of emotion. Tears ran down her cheeks as she looked at the casualty reports. They had won, but the cost had been real. Good people had died today. Ships had been lost. Families would grieve. But they had proven something important. Humanity was no longer the weak species that had been cast out 30 years ago. They were a power in their own right, and anyone who threatened them would pay the price. She wiped her eyes and began planning for the next battle. There would be more fighting ahead, but for the first time since the ouster, believed that humanity would survive. More than survive. They would win. 50 years had passed since the ouster. The Galactic Concord, which had once ruled 847 species across 1,000,000 worlds, was a shadow of its former self. Internal conflicts had torn it apart. Species that had been loyal members had left to join the growing Free World's Compact. The great crystal halls of Concord Command, once filled with representatives from across the galaxy, now stood half empty. President Maria Santos walked through those halls with steady steps. She was the great-granddaughter of immigrants who had fled one of the first colonies evacuated during the ouster. Her family had lost everything in those desperate days. Now she was about to reclaim something far greater. The assembly chamber looked exactly as the old records described it. Ambassador had stood in this very spot 50 years ago, facing judgment from species who feared humanity's potential. Maria thought about's final words to the conquered, the promise that humanity would not beg to return. She intended to honor that promise. High Chancellor sat on his ancient throne, but his crystal body was dim and cracked. Age had finally caught up with even his immortal species. Around him, the remaining conquered delegates watched in silence as Maria took her place at the center of the chamber. "We have come to discuss terms," said. His voice was weaker than it had been half a century ago, but it still carried the weight of. "The conquered recognizes that our past actions toward humanity were regrettable. We wish to make amends and restore diplomatic relations." Maria nodded slowly. "I appreciate the sentiment, Chancellor, but I think you misunderstand why I am here." She looked around at the assembled delegates, meeting their eyes one by one. Many of them had voted for humanity's expulsion all those years ago. "I am not here to ask for forgiveness or restoration. I am here to offer you a choice." She activated her own holographic display, filling the chamber with an image of the free world's compact. Over 400 species were represented, their territories spreading across vast regions of the galaxy. Human space alone was larger than what the conquered controlled at its height. "50 years ago, you cast us out because you were afraid of what we might become," Maria said. "You hoped that isolation would destroy us. Instead, it made us stronger. We built something new, something better. A community of species that supports each other instead of suppressing potential, that celebrates growth instead of fearing it." She gestured at the display. "The free world's compact has achieved more in 50 years than the conquered achieved in 12,000. We have cured diseases that your scientists called incurable. We have developed technologies that your engineers said were impossible. We have crossed distances that your astronomers believed could never be traveled." The chamber was completely silent, stared at her with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. For the first time in his long existence, he looked uncertain. "We did not come here to destroy you," Maria continued. "Despite everything you did to us, we are not interested in revenge. The compact is built on different principles. Everyone deserves a chance to grow. Everyone deserves a voice." She paused and let her words sink in. "So here is my offer. The conquered can join the free world's compact. You will be welcomed as equal partners with the same rights and responsibilities as everyone else. Your knowledge and your history will be valued. But the old ways are over. No more suppression. No more fear. No more casting out species because they might become too powerful." She looked directly at. "You spent building an empire based on control. We spent 50 years building a community based on trust. The choice is yours." The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Some species argued that joining the compact would be a humiliation. Others pointed out that they had no real alternative. The conquered was dying. Its economy was failing. Its military had never recovered from the defeat at. Without change, they would continue to decline until nothing remained. In the end, 412 species voted to accept Maria's offer. The rest scattered to the edges of known space, unwilling to live in a galaxy they no longer controlled. High Chancellor cast the final vote himself, his ancient voice carrying across the chamber one last time. "I have lived for a very long time," he said. "I have seen many things that I believed were impossible. Today, I have seen the impossible again. A species we tried to destroy has offered us mercy. A civilization we feared has offered us friendship." He bowed his great crystalline head. "Perhaps we were wrong about humans all along. Perhaps they were exactly what the galaxy needed." The formal merger took place on a space station constructed specifically for the occasion. Representatives from over 800 species gathered to sign the new charter, which guaranteed the sovereignty and dignity of every member world. Humanity stood at the center of the ceremony, not as conquerors, but as hosts welcoming old enemies into a new family. Maria Santos signed the charter on behalf of the Human Federation. As she put down the stylus, she thought about everyone who had made this moment possible. Ambassador, who had walked out of the conquered with her head held high. President Daniel Marsh, who had seen opportunity where others saw only disaster. Dr. Lisa Grant, Commander Park, Torres, Admiral Sam, Admiral Dawson, Governor Bate, and countless others whose names might never be recorded but whose courage had built something extraordinary. They had been told they were too much, too fast, too bold, too human. Now they stood at the center of the largest alliance the galaxy had ever seen. Jake was 28 years old, the same age his grandmother had been when she first arrived on Earth as a young diplomat. He stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Horizon, surrounded by a crew that represented a dozen different species. Humans worked alongside and then half a dozen others, united by a shared mission. They were about to attempt the first-ever jump to another galaxy. The technology had taken decades to develop, built on the foundation of the Tor's fold and enhanced by knowledge from the Remnant and 100 other sources. Nobody knew if it would work. The distances involved were beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Jake looked around at his crew and felt a surge of pride. His grandmother had been cast out of the galactic community 50 years ago. Now her grandson was about to leave the galaxy entirely, carrying the spirit of humanity and its allies into the unknown. "All stations report ready," his first officer announced. She was unnamed, her features making a gesture that Jake had learned to recognize as a smile. "The drive is charged. Jump coordinates are locked." Jake took a deep breath. Through the bridge windows, he could see the stars of his home galaxy stretching across infinity. Somewhere out there were Earth and New Anchorage, and in all the other worlds where humans had built their lives. Somewhere out there were the allies who had stood beside humanity through every challenge. "My grandmother said something once," Jake told his crew. "The day she walked out of the Concord for the last time. She said that humanity would never stop growing, that we would never stop reaching for the stars." He looked at the distant glow of Andromeda, visible as a faint smudge of light against the darkness. "They told us we were too much, too fast, too bold, too human. They tried to cage us at the edge of everything," he smiled. "Now look where we stand, at the edge of something new." He straightened in his chair and gave the order that would begin a new chapter in history. "Engage the drive. Let's see what is out there." The horizon vanished in a flash of light, carrying the hopes and dreams of 1,000 worlds into the void between galaxies. Behind them, the Milky Way continued to spin, filled with species that had learned an important lesson. Humanity was not a problem to be solved or a threat to be contained. They were exactly what they had always claimed to be: explorers, builders, dreamers who refused to accept limits, and they were just getting started. The stars themselves were no longer big enough to hold them. They needed new galaxies, new frontiers, new challenges to overcome, because that was what humans did. They faced the impossible and made it ordinary. They turned obstacles into opportunities. They never stopped pushing forward. And now, finally, the universe was learning what that meant.